We're going to the next story here. This is a damning one against Israel. This is a big deal. The ICJ just came down with another ruling. That's the International Court of Justice. And you guys have got to see this against Israel. The ICJ has just rejected every single Israeli point and found that Israel is an illegal occupier. They have a duty to ensure humanitarian relief is provided to the Palestinians. They must cooperate with the UN and specifically UNRWA and other aid agencies, and they must allow the ICRC access to Palestinian prisoners. Here are some highlights here. So they highlighted this advisory that came from the ICJ about the presence and activities, international organizations, and third states in relation to occupied Palestinian territory. And this is what I want to highlight here, because they did determine this over a year ago, that Israel is indeed occupying Gaza. They are reiterating that and calling Israel occupied territory. And I think the more that this gets into writing, the better it is, right? So obviously not exactly what we want to happen for the Palestinian people. I want them to be fully free. I don't want anyone to be occupied. Unfortunately, with the ICJ, they don't have the power to enforce, right? So they can tell us what's happening. They can make a ruling, but they don't have the power to enforce it. But what this shows you, again, is that Israel is an occupying nation, and they can't, they can continue to try to dispute this if they want to, but that is the reality of the situation. Let's get into this segment here. This is from Democracy Now! About this ruling.
The Court of Justice has ruled that Israel, as an occupying power, must allow UN aid into Gaza, and that Israel cannot use starvation as a method of warfare. Yuji Iwasawa, the president of the International Court of Justice, read the ruling Wednesday.
The court considers that Israel is under an obligation to agree to and facilitate relief schemes provided by the United Nations and its entities, including UNRWA.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "This is a very important decision, and I hope Israel will abide by it." This is Paul Reichler, one of the attorneys representing Palestine at the ICJ.
So on the one hand, you have the court finding that starvation as a method of civilians, as a method of warfare, is illegal, it's prohibited. And on the other, the court found that Israel deliberately prevented food from reaching the civilian population in Gaza. I don't see how a reasonable person, certainly acting in good faith, could then say that Israel has complied with its international legal obligations. Plainly, it has not.
And they're still doing that now. They're still blocking aid from coming in to Gaza now. J.D. Vance was just in Israel. We're going to get to that in just a second as well, because something else happened during his visit, which it seemed like caused some sort of embarrassment for J.D. Vance. The fact that this happened while he was there. I'm going to tell you what Donald Trump has also just said about this, but he's playing into this tactic here as well. But again, you have to keep reiterating that Israel is an occupying nation. And why do I keep saying that? The reason why you have to continue to, The reason why you have to continue to repeat that is because an occupying nation does not have the right to defend itself.
Israel condemned Wednesday's ruling and said it would not abide by the court's instructions. The Trump administration also condemned the opinion. We go now to Amman, Jordan, to speak with Tamara Al-Rafai. She is spokesperson and director of external relations for UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Tamara. Can you describe what's happening on the ground? How much aid, how many trucks is Israel allowing in? And what about UNRWA in particular, which it has banned?
The most important thing for us at UNRWA to reiterate is that we're the largest humanitarian agency in action in Gaza, and we have never stopped providing medical assistance, managing the shelters, disposing of solid waste, pumping and trucking clean drinking water throughout this conflict, and despite the ban by the government of Israel on international staff. 12,000 Palestinian staff members of UNRWA, men and women, have continued to work in Gaza, and that is why our services never stopped, even though international personnel and the goods, the supplies, the foods, the hygiene kits, the tents of UNRWA have been banned of going into Gaza. So for the last 10 days, and with the ceasefire, the fighting has subsided in many parts, which has allowed a lot of people in Gaza to start moving back to check in on their homes. But more than 90% of housing units in Gaza are destroyed, and these people are going to need immediate, urgent shelter and shelter material, including winter clothes and blankets, in the coming few weeks. Meanwhile, although the agreement calls for 600 trucks per day of food and other humanitarian supplies, what we've seen in the last few days is certainly an easing, so a slight increase in the number of trucks going in, but we're way, way, way below the 600. So yesterday, 281 trucks went in. On Monday, 263. That's less than half of 600.
Yeah, so they still don't have as much aid as they need. And I've also seen settlers still blocking aid. I watched a guy, he had his child in a stroller, and he was pushing the stroller and stood right in the middle of the road in front of the aid trucks, willing to risk the life of your own child, right? So that Palestinians won't eat. So we do have to remember, like, 90% of the housing has been destroyed. So Palestinians are living in tents, even though they have made their way back to what, was their home at that point in time. And now all of this is happening at the same time when JD Vance is visiting Israel. I want to get into that clip here because they should be embarrassed, right? JD Vance should be embarrassed. I think he is a little bit embarrassed about what went down while he was there. So he was there in Israel with Jared Kushner talking about the state of Gaza.
Vice President J.D. Vance says the ceasefire deal in Gaza is going better than expected.
The optimism comes as he arrives in Israel to reinforce the deal that was brokered just a few weeks ago. The vice president is expected to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow. Fox's Rebecca Castor has more.
Vice President J.D. Vance arriving in Israel Tuesday with a tough task ahead. Get President Trump's peace plan back on track and push Israel and Hamas to make harder concessions as part of phase 2.
That every time that there's an act of violence, there's this inclination to say, oh, this is the end of the ceasefire. This is the end of the peace plan. It's not the end. It is, in fact, exactly how this is going to have to happen when you have people who hate each other, who have been fighting against each other for a very long time. We are doing very well. We are in a very good place.
Since Hamas.
So I just want to say something here, where he says that it's not the end of the peace plan. So you know what, JD? It's not the end of the peace plan because it wasn't actually a peace plan to begin with. so there's that, right? JD Vance and them know that Israel was going to do what Israel was going to do. And he's basically there to kind of save face for the administration. Him and Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, the guy who has already decided with Trump, Elon Musk, and other billionaires to basically turn Gaza into a resort, a billionaire tax haven. That is the plan for Gaza. It's already written out. We showed the PDF documents on the show a couple of nights ago. It's already there in motion. And I'd say, like I told you, I think this was planned way before October 7th. I don't think this came up after October 7th. I think this was already in the works. So Jared Kushner standing behind JD Vance there. He's like, I'm here to protect my future real estate. That's why I'm here, buddy. I'm here to let everybody know this is going to be great. We're going to start rebuilding and make new developments, etc. It's wild and crazy.
Very good place.
Since Hamas released the remaining living hostages last week, there have been several ceasefire violations. Israel.
We have to pass this part here because of, I know how YouTube can be about, oh, you showed this, da 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 da. But they were talking about the ceasefire violations, and then we come back in right about here.
Have to use force to disarm Hamas if they stay in the mindset they're currently in.
The newly freed hostages and their families cannot be more thankful that phase 1 of the peace plan was successful, though. Many of them got to meet with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, yesterday to thank them in person for their efforts.
So you see who they focus on and who they don't focus on, right? They're not talking to, of course, any of the Palestinian hostages that were released by Israel. Israel told them, you cannot talk to the media. Nobody finds that to be a little bit strange. So we can talk about those things as well. But JD Vance was there. And this comes about at a time where the Knesset was voting to annex the West Bank, which is something that Donald Trump had already told them going into this deal, that they could not annex the West Bank. But of course, like I said, Israel will do whatever it wants to do anyway. Jared Kushner here does speak at this event. He says no reconstruction aid will go into Hamas-controlled areas. So again, here we go, right? Like, they can say this and say, oh, well, we're not going to send any aid over there because Hamas is there. But they could say that for anywhere in Gaza. Listen to him here.
No reconstruction aid, no reconstruction funds will be going into areas that Hamas still controls. And as far as the demilitarization goes, once the ISF is up, there needs to be a security force that they can feel safe from, that in order for it to be the transition to be complete. So that needs to happen. There are considerations happening now in the area that the IDF controls, as long as that can be secured, to start the construction as a new Gaza in order to give the Palestinians living in Gaza a place to go, a place to get jobs, a place to live. So that's one of the many things being considered. Right now, again, there's been several work streams that have occurred over the last years. Those are all being synthesized and updated here at the center, and then they'll go before President Trump and the Board of Peace to get recommendations on what to build, how to phase it. But that's definitely something now that's being very strongly considered.
Really sad about this, because the thing is, the IDF, Israel shouldn't control any part of Gaza, but they still are, right? They shouldn't at all. But Jared Kushner, he wants to come in, start his real estate project. And in order for that to happen, like I said, that's one of the reasons why they need Hamas to lay down the arms so that they can go into Gaza and it can be a resort for them, right? For the rich to play. I don't know why JD Vance has that look on his face. Don't know why he has that look there, but I do want to show you this part here as well. We were talking about what's happening in the West Bank connected to all of this. JD Vance says he was insulted by the Knesset vote on West Bank annexation. So yeah, that happened, while he was there. They just embarrass you to your face. They don't give a damn. JD Vance said on Thursday before leaving Israel that he was insulted by the Knesset vote on annexing the occupied West Bank, which took place while he was visiting the country this week. Why does this matter? Netanyahu has control over the majority of the Knesset and could have stopped the vote by taking it off the agenda or ordering the members of his party to vote against it. He chose not to in order to avoid a confrontation with his ultra-nationalist coalition partners. The Knesset voted on Wednesday in a preliminary reading on two bills that focused on annexation. One bill that was put forward by a member of the coalition called for the annexation of the entire West Bank. The other was put forward by the opposition and called for annexation of one of the biggest settlements in the West Bank. Netanyahu ordered the members of his party not to vote on the bills, but he didn't demand the same from other members of his coalition and didn't take action to stop that vote. The two bills, with votes of some members of the coalition, including one member of Netanyahu's party, as well as votes from more than a dozen members of opposition, included the head of opposition, Yair Lapid. So JD Vance did respond. I don't know if I have that one here. That one's right there. We'll get to the response in just a second. This is what they are proposing, like the West Bank, right? So let's go through this here. The law proposed to impose Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank passed in its preliminary meeting with 25 votes in favor and 24 votes against. Let's go down here. In essence, the party's position means that annexation of the West Bank should continue de facto as it is happening now without an official declaration. So let me break this down. Just because they don't have all the votes and say, yes, let's go forward with it, that doesn't stop them from taking land from people in the West Bank. They're still doing that anyway, right? So a vote basically puts it on record. And as you can see, if you look at the West Bank, the yellow, purple parts here, those are Palestinian communities within annexed territory. But if you look at the purple, blue parts here, that's Israeli settlements. And this is what has been happening to the West Bank over time, ladies and gentlemen. Like, Israel wants all of this, all of this. And they've been taking homes and taking land bit by bit. There was a woman, an elderly woman recently, I don't know if people saw it. She was attacked by settlers in the West Bank near, I think it was like an olive tree or whatever. That woman was put in the hospital because of her brutal attack from the settlers. Again, but the world continues to go on and let Israel do what they are doing. JD Vance did respond here. JD Vance, when he was asked about the vote in the Knesset on annexing the West Bank, let's listen to what he says here.
West Bank, sorry,
yeah, go ahead. We'll do, yeah.
The West Bank vote yesterday that took place while you were in the country.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was sort of confused by that.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was just sort of confused by that. Seriously.
I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it. Thank you.
This is the guy who is most likely going to be running for president in 2028. So here's the thing. It's not really just about the vote. It's the fact that they have been stealing homes and land in the West Bank for years. And I have seen it, the fact that these settlers, they are just armed to the T, just go in and raid people's homes, set fire to people's homes so that they can take their land. There was an expose on CNN. This was on CNN of all places a couple of years ago, prior to October 7th, of a Palestinian family where the gentleman was saying that someone has to be home at all times. So sometimes, like, if he has to go to work, he has to have someone from the family stay in the house so that they don't burn the house down, steal the house. That's what we're talking about, folks. And JD Vance just brushes it off like it's no big deal. No, Israel was hell. Israel was hell. We talk about, as much as these politicians talk about radical this and radical that, the radicalism is Israel, everything that they are doing. Stealing land, burning homes, killing people, laughing about it, making videos, laughing about it. That's the violence that everyone should shun. Everyone should be against that, what Israel is doing. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But we talk about taking our power back. With this situation, it can be very tough, right? Because it's foreign policy. We don't live there. Most of us, we don't live there. We feel helpless. Like, what can we do? One of the things that we can do, which is 100% nonviolent, is the BDS method. Boycott. Boycott. Don't buy Israeli products. Don't buy Israeli goods. If you're not sure which products are Israeli products, if you look them up on Google, I know, like, after October 7th, there were many sites that were created that listed like all the products that were owned by Google. I can pull up one of those sites at some point, hand it to you guys, show you guys via my newsletter on the show or whatever, but you can also Google it. They had list all the products that are owned by Israel, the Israeli products. Stop buying their shit. I even had to do this with the yogurt. Oikos, because Oikos has this protein yogurt. There are other companies that make protein yogurt. Oikos is also Israeli. Boycott them. Once you know what everything that they own, if we did this collectively in mass, that could have an impact on Israel. But it's the same thing I said, like with all the other countries, it's like, Israel, stop what you're doing, but they're still buying things from Israel. They're still doing business with Israel, like Turkey and, et cetera. Why are you still doing business with them? The way that you really hit back at Israel is their economy. So stop buying things from them. Don't buy anything that is Israeli owned if you can help it. And I think we can. That's one of the ways. That's how we take our power back. Think about it. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.